Hello everybody, Joel Tadman here from Golf Monthly. I hope you're well. And in this video, I'm going to try and uncover the truth about rusty wedges. They're making a bit of a comeback this year, but I really wanted to dive into the concept of rusty wedges. It's one I've been skeptical about personally for a long time, and I wanted to kind of prove or disprove the common theories that there are around rusty wedges in the fact that they are said to spin a little bit more and feel a little bit softer. Now I know I keep going on about it, but make sure you click that subscribe button to the Golf Monthly YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our equipment review videos, all our other content across instruction, tour pros, rules, all that sort of thing. You'll get a notification every time a video drops so you don't miss a thing. We've seen some launches where golfers can now buy raw wedges, and one of the big launches that really thrust raw wedges back into the limelight was the TaylorMade Milled Grind 2 wedge. Now this was a really clever design from TaylorMade, whereby the face itself was a patented raw face. So while the rest of the head maintained either its satin chrome or matte black finish, you can see here with this sample I've got now that the face itself over time has oxidized and rusted, and TaylorMade say there are a whole host of benefits to having a rusty face. The first being it should feel softer. They also say it should spin a little bit more because the rusty kind of texture on the face should increase the friction you get from the face, which gets into the cover to generate more spin. They also say it should preserve the geometry of the grooves a little bit better over time, so you don't lose as much spin over time. The wedge degradation is a little bit less. And there are some other benefits as well. TaylorMade say the fact that the face is rusty reduces the glare you can get in certain scenarios depending on where your wedge is pointing, which can be distracting. So I wanted to give these wedges a thorough test. I did it in a couple of different ways. So you see here I've got the TaylorMade Milled Grind 2 wedge, and I tested this straight after peeling the sticker off. So obviously peel the sticker off, you've got a pristine face there, brand new, no rust on it. I hit a variety of shots on the GC Quad launch monitor, on an outdoor net here at Burley Park Golf Club in Stamford, and I hit a 50-yard pitch shot, and I hit a full shot with this 56. I then soaked it and allowed it to rust over time. I did accelerate the process somewhat. I left it to rust overnight and came back the next day and hit the same shots, and the face was very similar to this. You can see here the rest of the wedge is looking nice and pristine. I've not used it a whole lot, but the face is very rusty, and I hit the same shots, 50-yard pitch and a full shot. And then to really test the theory, I found my old Cleveland RTX 3 wedge. Now this is a very rusty wedge, as you can see. I haven't used it a great deal out on the course, but have used it a little bit, and then it's been in my garage, and over that time it has gathered an awful lot of rust. So I was keen to test this up against not only my current SM7 54-degree wedge, which I have been using quite a lot over the last year or so, but also up against a brand new SM7 54-degree wedge. And we've got a little chip shot, we've got a pitch shot and a full shot with these clubs to really ascertain the differences in performance we got on the GC Quad launch monitor. I'm going to hit them out on the golf course as well. So before we have a hit with them out on the golf course, let's take a look at the data we got from the GC Quad launch monitor to see if we could notice any difference in performance with the rusty wedge compared to the non-rusty wedge. The key numbers I'm looking for in terms of performance are spin and also launch, because launch is a good indication as to the amount of friction on the face, and there are people saying that rusty faces have more friction, therefore the ball should launch a little bit lower compared to faces with less friction. So let's first look at the TaylorMade Milled Grind 2 with the 56 degrees of loft, starting with the 50-yard pitch shot with the brand new face. You can see it launched at 29.7 and spun at 7.6, and then you compare that to the rusty face launching a lot higher, about 5 degrees higher at 34 degrees of loft, which would suggest there's less friction on the face there. And then it's spinning at, on average, 5,300, which is, you know, a great deal less than with the brand new face. It's around about 2,300-ish RPM less spin with that rusty face. So an interesting conclusion there. And then we move on to the full shot, similar scenario. So we've got a much higher launch with the rusty face compared to the brand new face on the full shot, and we've got much less spin as well. We're talking pretty much 4,000 RPM less spin here with the full Milled Grind 2 on the full shot. Also slightly less carry distance, so maybe I wasn't swinging it as fast on this day compared to when I tested it with the brand new face, but some significant differences there. I think you'd agree. Rusty face not delivering more spin on the GC quad launch monitor in this scenario. So now let's have a look at my really old rusty RTX3 wedge. I say old, it's not actually been used a great deal, and we'll compare it to a brand new Vokey SM7 wedge. So, you know, people saying rusty wedges should actually maintain their spin or even get more spin over time. I thought it'd be interesting to compare it to a brand new wedge in the same loft, and also my current SM7, which is a little bit older and I use it a lot. So an interesting comparison. Definitely used it a lot more than the RTX3 that I tested. So let's start with the 50-yard pitch shot. You can see the RTX3 is spinning at 7.8 and the brand new SM7 spinning at 8.1, so about 300 RPM more spin. It's also launching basically the same degree, which is interesting, but then you move on to a slightly shorter chip shot. The SM7 is spinning more again, around about 400 RPM more spin, and it is launching a little bit lower than the RTX3. And then we move on to the full shot. RTX3 full shot spinning at 10.4, SM7, the brand new one, spinning at 11.2, so around about 800 RPM more spin there, and it is launching slightly lower as well. Compare that to the old SM7 full shot. That's spinning at 10.8, so that's also slightly more than the RTX3. Hopefully you'll agree, we've tested a lot of different combinations there of wedges, you know, lots of different scenarios, some discrepancies in the number, but you can summarise from all this data that there's no conclusive evidence from the GC quad launch monitor that shows rusty wedges produce more spin. Let's take them out on the golf course and see what we discover. We're going to have a look at these clubs and also hit some shots and see if we can detect any differences in the flight or the spin, the way it reacts on the green, that sort of thing. I mean, starting with the TaylorMade Milled Grind 2, it is quite an unusual thing to look down on, you know, that really rusty face with the rest of the wedge looking pristine. Obviously it's still going to look great in the bag, but down by the ball it is, I would say it does take some getting used to. Conversely, you know, I think I prefer the look of a more kind of classic wedge. So this is my Vokey SM7, obviously it's chrome plated, so it's got all the same colour throughout, and I think just because I'm used to that, it's definitely something I prefer. And then you think, look at the my really rusty RTX3 wedge here. So this is, you can see the whole of the head is rusty, and think it just looks kind of worn, tired. It looks older than it probably is. But the one thing I do like about this one especially is that over time, and you probably get this with the TaylorMade as well, that, you know, the wear marks on the face become more apparent. So not only does that kind of focus your attention on hitting the center of the wedge every time, but also if you are hitting the heel on toe more often than not, you'll get a wear mark to give you that feedback to show you where you are striking the ball in the face. So raw wedges do have that kind of feedback tool element to it. And I think, you know, the more you play with a rusty wedge, actually, the more the rust will wear off. And obviously, if you practice a lot as well, that will be the case. So I think you kind of get that nice wear pattern where the raw finish is coming through near the leading edge, and then it kind of gets more and more rusty towards the back of the wedge. And that's certainly the case with this RTX3. So let's start with the RTX3. This is the really rusty wedge we've got here. I've not practiced this shot, so could be interesting. This wedge is also a lot longer than the others, but let's see if we can hit a shot to this pin. Pretty good. A lot of grab there. You notice that flew quite low and checked up quite nicely. So let's see how the Milled Grind 2 compares. Again, these are all the same golf balls. This is the rusty face. See, it's really rusty actually. Towards the leading edge, so try and hit a similar shot with this. Bit higher, but it is higher loft. To be fair, that reacted a similar amount, I would say. Then if you can see that on the camera there, definitely a little bit higher flight, but it is 2 degrees more loft. And let's try the my Vokey SM7. This is my current wedge. I've used it quite a lot, but it doesn't have a rusty face, so see if we can put it inside those 2 shots. Well, that's run out a little bit more actually, to be fair. Interesting, because maybe I did catch that slightly heavy, but in the same loft compared to the Cleveland, definitely a little bit more run out there, so maybe there's future in this rusty wedge concept yet. actually quite difficult to see the leading edge with this rusty face up against the kind of brown sand. It's actually basically exactly the same colour, and it is quite tricky to align. Not a bad shot though. Right, okay, so I've tested these 3 different wedges in various scenarios, around greens, hitting into greens, on full shots, bunker shots, chip shots, pitch shots, you name it. I've done it. I've even hit them on a GC quad launch monitor, and my conclusion is inconclusive. I'm sorry, it's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but I'm kind of torn because the launch monitor data showed me that the rusty wedges weren't spinning as much as the kind of new faces or the plated wedges. But then you come out on the golf course and there were some shots that seemed to spin more with the rusty face than they did the plated wedge, and then there were others that didn't. So I think to provide an answer to say that rusty wedges spin more conclusively would be a bit reckless of me. I think there are an awful lot of variables in play when it comes to the spin you generate on the launch monitor. You've got things like strike, angle of attack, dynamic loft as well. These play a really big part in the numbers that you get on the launch monitor. And then out on the course, you know, you've got things like grass and mud getting into the path of the club face, coming into the ball. There are some extra factors, you know, in that real world environment. So the rusty factor, any differences there would be marginal. You know, even in terms of the sound and feel on certain shots, didn't really feel like there was much difference. If I had to put my hat on them feeling softer or not, I would say that they did feel ever so slightly softer than the plated wedge, but there really wasn't much in it. And I think if I was doing a blind test, I would struggle to tell the difference. So I think much of the kind of preferences around rusty wedges will come down to the looks. For me, I don't like my wedges to kind of tarnish over time. I like them to look as pristine as possible. And for you guys, if you're spending a lot of money on a new wedge, I would imagine a lot of you want your wedges to look sparkling new for as long as possible. So if you do go for, you know, a completely raw wedge like this old Cleveland RTX3 I had, this is probably not the way to go. Obviously the TaylorMade Milled Grind 2 does maintain that pristine look on the back and on the sole and on the heel and toe areas, but you can see the face here, it just looks a bit untidy. It just looks a bit old. Some people are going to like that. It kind of frames the ball nicely, you know, with those polished sections either side of the raw rusty section. It's not something I would choose over a normal plated wedge. There you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Apologies it couldn't be more conclusive, but hopefully you enjoyed it anyway. I'd love to hear from you. Please do comment on this video. Tell me, do you like the look of a rusty wedge? I did a poll on Twitter recently asking if you liked the look of a rusty wedge. It had nearly 1,000 votes, and 72% of you said no, you didn't like the look of a rusty wedge. But if you didn't like the look of it, but you got extra spin and better feel with it, would you sacrifice the looks and put it in play? Or do you like your wedge to look pristine, like a plated wedge, like my Vokey SM7, over a longer period of time? I would love to hear from you. Click the like button, of course, if you like what you're watching. But for now, from Birdie Park Golf Club here in Stamford, it's goodbye.